So, Keira, welcome.
Thank you very much.
Lovely to have you here.
Thank you.
And I'd like to plunge straight in by asking you about how your career began, because that almost begins with your earliest childhood. I gather that you were born in or near Teddington.
Yes, I was born in Teddington. My mother is a playwright. She was an actress, and my dad is an actor. And apparently I first asked for an agent at age 3. I don't think that I knew what one was, but they were always calling the house, so I thought I wanted one. And they finally gave in when I was 6. And it was actually because I'm dyslexic, and they only found out when I was 6 and I couldn't read. And the headmaster of my school said, you need to find a carrot to dangle in front of her. So is there anything that she wants that you're not giving her? And my mum went, well, an agent. And and so he said, well, you better give it to her then. So it was, I was only allowed to act in the summer holidays. Or rather go up for auditions or anything like that. And I was only allowed to do any of it if my grades stayed at a certain level or went up, but if they went down, then I wasn't allowed to go to auditions.
And did that work reasonably well?
I left school at 16, so it didn't work that well, but I
you
got
did
good
stay
grades.
in school till 16.
Yeah.
And I gather you had your first part when you were about 7, is that right, in a TV production?
I did a TV production of something called Royal Celebration, which was about a street party for the wedding of Charles and Diana. I think I was 6, actually. Maybe 6 or 7, can't remember which. And I think it involved me running around going, Mummy, Daddy. And that was it, really. But I loved it. So.
And how long was it before you resumed your career?
I pretty much did one job a year from when I started, and then I hit 15, and I got a role in a film called The Hole, which I don't actually think ever came out here, which was about a load of teenagers that got stuck down a hole and died, which was really cheery. But from then, that actually got me sort of Bend It Like Beckham, which was the following year when I was 16. And I got sort of Bend It Like Beckham and Pirates of the Caribbean and Love Actually all within a year of each other.
Let's go to Bend It Like Beckham. Were you a soccer enthusiast? Was that part of the link?
I think that's actually why I got it. I think I was probably the only girl that could actually go in and really say, I love this and I do play it, and I was obsessed by it at that point, yes.
And did you get to do all the playing yourself? Was there any body doubling? Or?
Certainly wasn't any body doubling, no. No, I did all the playing myself, and totally loved it. I was actually doing my GCSEs at the same time, so that was quite trying. But we did, and it was a great group of girls, and everybody thought it was going to be crap. And
really?
Everybody thought that there was no way it was going to work. And I remember telling people that I was doing it and saying I'm doing this film called Bend It Like Beckham, and people just laughed because they thought it was a hysterical idea.
But not in a good way at that point.
Definitely not in a good way. And then it came out, and I remember the first time I saw it, 'cause I went with my mum, and she said, I think, and it's still one of the best things that anybody has ever said about any film I've been in, she came out and she said, it makes me want to be young again.
Oh, God.
I thought that was absolutely, it's always stuck with me, so yeah, it was great.
Was it an enjoyable film to make?
Yeah, it was. It was. It definitely was. Partly because it was a group of girls, you know, and I've done a couple of films with women, and I think we get a very bad rap, and I've always had a great time, Pride and Prejudice being another one, but, you know, that and theatre productions I've done with just lots of groups of women, and I've always had a brilliant time like that, so yeah, it was great.
Now, if I understand rightly, your first big blockbuster film was actually when you were pretty young, and that was the first of the new Star Wars trilogy.
It was, when I was 12, yeah.
Tell me about that experience.
Well, I didn't know what I was going up for. At that point, the year before we actually filmed it, they were seeing, I think, every kid everywhere. And we were all told that we were going up for the young Princess Leia or Luke Skywalker. So I went in for that. And then I was actually working on something else, which was sort of a TV thing called Coming Home, which was the first proper part I've ever played. And I got this phone call saying, you've got a part in Star Wars, you've just got to come. But they wouldn't tell me what the part was. So I went down there and suddenly realised that actually I didn't really have a part. I was being Natalie Portman's stand-in because we looked the same, and I was, it was the same age and everything, and I couldn't figure out what was going on at all. And then eventually they sort of came up with this idea, because we did look so similar, that there was this sort of decoy queen. But again, I mean, it was one of these Hollywood things where nobody actually got any script pages, so I had no idea what I was meant to be doing.
I gather that you actually felt a bit of the magic of Star Wars that had been with you from watching the first movies. You weren't feeling that as you were filming that.
Well, no, it was all green screen, and you find out that lightsabers aren't real, and and I had no idea what was going on. Everybody really enjoyed marching around with a da 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 da, which I think everyone got told off for because the sound people obviously didn't like it that we were singing the theme tune the entire time. But
tell me about the next film that you made, which was Love Actually. I hope that was as happy experience to shoot as it was to watch.
It was a very, very lovely experience. I wasn't on it for very long, but it was with Andrew Lincoln, who is a wonderful actor, and Chiwetel Ejiofor, who is a glorious, glorious actor and a very lovely man. And yeah, I mean, I think getting the opportunity to be in a Richard Curtis film, being English, is pretty good. No, so it was great.
I mean, that business of actually not having a huge part in the film, that presumably was quite an interesting experience in itself, in that you didn't get a chance to sort of shape your character with the other actors in the way that you would if normally.
I do remember having the read-through for that because suddenly the entire cast was there. And I think I was 17 when I did that. And I remember being so utterly mortified because I'm crap in a read-through on a good day. And I actually left. I sprinted out of there and burst into tears. So it was one of the most... I'm sure I wasn't that bad. I'm sure I got the lines out. But that kind of thing of having that many incredibly famous actors around did totally annihilate me on that first read-through. But it was amazing. It was an amazing thing because it was basically a load of shorts that are put together. So I don't think anybody that was in it knew what the whole thing would look like at all. So it was fascinating.
That thing you were saying about lack of confidence, which it's hard to believe, but you've made a number of references to it in the past, and in particular to the next film on your list, which is the Pirates of the Caribbean blockbusters, saying that you never believed you would get the part, and you were sort of packed just for a week because you thought they'd get rid of you. Is that remotely true?
No, it's completely true. I went up for an awful lot in that year. I happened to get Pirates of the Caribbean and Love Actually, but I didn't get an awful lot of others. And I remember actually being really pissed off with my agent for sending me up for Pirates, because there was quite, the room. You hear who's up for things, you hear who's meant to get them, and it was already, people had already said who was meant to get that part. So I was like, why the hell are you sending me in for this, and I'm never going to get it. I remember distinctly standing in W.H. Smith's, which is a stationery shop in England, being really angry that I was going up for this because it was going to be so humiliating. And I think partly I then got there very late for the audition, and I'm never late ever. So it was Tubes that had stopped working, and I was really flustered and really pissed off because I shouldn't be there anyway. And I think weirdly that worked. It clearly worked. And
it gave you an edge.
The part must have given me a very interesting edge, yeah.
What about the actual experience of shooting that movie?
Well, it was extra. I mean, I think given the success of it now, I think what people forget is when we were doing that one as well, it was based on a Disney theme park ride, and and everybody was just like, that's really embarrassing. And it made it definitely cooler that Johnny Depp was in it, but it was still based on a Disney theme park ride, and Johnny Depp at that point hadn't had a commercial success, and so nobody thought that would work. And even, we had every single Disney exec on set at the beginning, and then suddenly Gore Verbinski, the director, had a film out that was a remake of The Ring. Have I got that right? It is The Ring, isn't it? Yeah. And suddenly that went to number one. And all of a sudden, I remember the atmosphere on set totally just calm. Everything was calm, and millions of executives disappeared, and suddenly we were just sort of left alone. But I have to say that again, nobody thought that it would really do anything. And it wasn't until we were actually sitting it was the day before the premiere, and they had a screening that they let us, sit into. We're sitting in this screening, and suddenly people are laughing, and suddenly people are having this. And I remember I was sitting next to Jack Davenport, who's in the film, and he just went, "Oh, I think this is working." I was like, "It is. How weird."
Tell me about Johnny Depp and his wonderful Jack Sparrow. Is that, I mean, how did you respond when he adopted that persona? Because I don't think that was planned in the beginning,
No, it
was
definitely wasn't. It was absolutely written as a totally straight character. And it was extraordinary, again, at the read-through of that, which was at the Viper Room, which was amazing. And I remember him coming into the room and me, I was 17, and my God, I had 2 friends at school who fucking loved him so much. So I'd just come from sort of bedrooms at home that were covered in pictures of this man, and I was quite embarrassed about that. And he came in, and I was like, oh God, he is really fit. And then he came over, and he just went, hi, I'm Johnny, nice to meet you. And he had all these gold teeth. And I was just like, you've got gold teeth. And from then on, it was sort of fine. But I have to say, it was an extraordinary thing to see that performance come out, and particularly when, and I don't feel bad about saying this because he said it, it's quite out there. The producers were like, do not do that, do not, this does not work. They watched the rushes, this doesn't work, and he was like, well, this is the only way that I know how to play the character. So if you want to get somebody else, cool, but this is how I'm going to do it.
Did it work for you? Did you think it was a good approach to the character?
It was hilarious. I mean, it was hysterical. I mean, absolutely. You kind of constantly going, what are you doing? Like, this is amazing, And it's been it still is. I don't think I'd ever be ballsy enough, I have to say, if a producer came up and said, we really don't like that. I'm not quite sure that I'd be ballsy enough to really stick by it in that kind of a way. I'd love to think that I would be, and maybe one day I will be, but I'm still not yet. It was an amazing thing to see that, and to see his absolute commitment to that vision of what that was. And I have to say, Gore, the director, supported him in it as well. But it was a very inspiring thing to see. And also taking something that absolutely was not there on the page and totally building this weird creation up out of nothing. I mean, not out of nothing, because, the words were there, but really out of very little.
But you were back in the world of corsets and hoop dresses for Pride and Prejudice. Well, not literally hoop dresses, but tell me about the shooting of Pride and Prejudice and how you approached that role.
Well, I think with the success of Pirates, and I was incredibly fortunate with that, I was suddenly given the opportunity to choose roles. And the first one that I chose was actually a film called The Jacket, which John Maybury, the director, directed, and it's a very dark, sort of strange psychological piece. The second one was Pride and Prejudice, and the third one was a Tony Scott film called Domino. So they were all done within about 9 months of each other. They were absolutely back to back. Pride and Prejudice, I think, was one that I couldn't read it when I was little, but I used to listen to the book tape on a absolute circle. All the time. I was totally, totally obsessed with it when I was about 10. And so when it came up, I saw myself as her. I was her. And I think actually it's not that uncommon. I think most women, particularly who really love that novel, do see themselves as her or want to be her or love her, in that way. And I think in that way it made it a terrifying thing to take it on, because suddenly for the first time I realised I was dealing with people's very strong opinions about a character that I hadn't even started to play yet. And that was quite interesting. But for me, it was also, it was a very funny time, because Pirates of the Caribbean had come out, and although it was this big critical success, I was the girl in it, and I was the pretty girl in it, and I was very young, and therefore probably very stupid, and probably a model, and probably was pretty shit, particularly in the British media, So it was this strange thing of suddenly going, okay, you've got a lot of success, but not people going that you can actually act. So taking that on was suddenly terrifying, because suddenly you go at age 18, 19, well, fuck, you're right, maybe you're right, and I can't, and I thought I could do this, but actually I can't do this. And it was actually, my first time with Joe Wright, and he was the first person who sort of said to me, you absolutely can do this, we're going to do it together, and this is going to be great. And I am forever grateful to him for that.
Did you find that what you learned about yourself in that played into the way you handle the character in Atonement?
I always like a bitch. The thing about Atonement that I was so excited with was I think almost you could see where Joe was going with his stylization. The acting is very stylized in that. It's that 1940s British style of acting. And that's what I just loved. And partly because it was films that my dad had been obsessed with. You know, I must have watched Brief Encounter for the first time when I was about 8 or something, and that would be our Christmas movie. And so that kind of, you know, that kind of thing was very... And so the opportunity, I think I was the first one when he said it, because a lot of people with that went, oh, you're going, you know, people are going to find it really difficult to get into that and to emotionally engage if you're kind of doing that. And I was like, oh, yeah, come on, let's do it. And really, really loved that kind of trying to find that, I don't know if warmth is the right word, but what was going on inside this weird, brittle kind of creature was something that, she was like a pressure cooker. And again, I think that, you know, when you're in your, I should imagine all through your life, there are points when you feel that you've got this emotion is almost like a pressure cooker that's going to bubble over, particularly if you're trying to suppress it. And this was a person who was suppressing it so much, and it was just kind of exploding out of it. And I found that really interesting.
I wonder if again, what you learnt from doing that played into your handling of the role of a script that I believe your mother wrote, The Edge of Love, about Dylan Thomas.
Yeah.
That was an interesting movie.
It's a very interesting movie. Very few people on this side of the pond have seen it.
We got screeners, I think, so
there
it helped.
You go. It got a very tiny release. It was, yeah, it's an extraordinary film, and it was a wonderful thing to be able to work with my mum, because I've grown up with her words. She's a very stylized writer, and her words and stories have been so much a part of my life, you know, and suddenly being able to actually work with them was almost the easiest thing I've ever done. It was like putting a glove on. It was a wonderful thing to kind of to be able to do that with her. The character I think is much softer. She happens to fuck her best friend's husband, but you know, whatever. She's much softer. She's Welsh, and half my family's Welsh. So I think with that one, it felt like a very family. I mean, for obvious reasons, my mum wrote it, but very much within within everything that I know and my background and Dylan Thomas. My mum used to read me Under Milk Wood as a kid, so you know, the world of Dylan Thomas was very much sort of something that was a huge part of my life.
Sounds as though you're a fairly close family.
Very, 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 really annoyingly close family, yeah.
And I mean, have your parents, apart from obviously the initial period, influenced the parts you've taken or the way your career has developed?
They, right from the get-go, they didn't really give me any, no, they wanted it to be my own opinion. They've always been very like that, quite annoyingly, actually. You sort of go, what do you want to do? And she'll go, no, what do you want to do? Just say. So, no, I mean, my dad did my one and only acting lesson. My first acting lesson was actually from my dad right before Pride and Prejudice, and he sat me down at the kitchen table and he said, right, you've been doing very well off your instincts, but that's only going to get you so far, so I'm going to teach you about Stanislavski in an afternoon. And he sort of just gave me those very, very basic actor questions. Why, how, when, really, why, you know, and also gave me a piece of advice which has been really good, which is beware of anger. He said, it's never that interesting. And always, if you're going for it, make sure that it's the absolute last resort. And I've kind of stuck. I mean, I think that's a very good piece of advice,
yes,
you know,
yes.
Particularly if you're an angry young man inside.
But actually, it raises the interesting question. I mean, you haven't formally studied acting, and yet you come from a family steeped in show business and theatricality, and father an actor. Did at any point you think, perhaps I should? Or did success come so fast that you thought, well, look, there's no need for it?
No, I did think I should, and that was always the plan. And indeed, you know, friends of my mum and dad it's all actor friends or, you know, writer friends, and they were all saying go to drama school because you can make mistakes there and nobody will see them and they don't matter. And if you do your learning in public, they'll rip you apart and it will be very public. And I went yes. But you know, I think from being the daughter of actors, you know that and they've done really well, and we had a lovely house, and we always went away on holidays, and I always felt totally secure. But there were times when they were totally out of work, and there were times when they were working in other jobs, and there were times where they didn't know if they could pay the mortgage. And so you know that just because things are being offered today, it doesn't mean that they're going to be offered tomorrow. And I think I felt that quite keenly, and just went, I've just got to kind of jump in and see what happens, because that space might not open up again.
Right. But I'm sure your fears are misplaced. But
I don't know. I'm an actor. I always think that the last job that I've done will be the last job I'll ever do, and the phone will stop ringing. I don't think that feeling ever goes away.
Well, perhaps it gives you an edge.
Maybe it does. Maybe it does.
Tell me about the Duchess, because there you were. I suppose that's possibly the most aristocratic part you had played until Anna Karenina, because the Bennets were not totally haughty.
No.
Tell me how you liked playing the Duchess.
I liked playing the Duchess very much. Ralph Fiennes was a massive. It was an extraordinary thing to watch him play the role of my husband, the Duke, in that. Partly because it was taking a character who should absolutely be the baddie, and kind of spinning it on its head, and making him understandable, making him into this creature who just can't handle her and can't quite emotionally engage with it. And watching him do that was again a total fascination. And along with Johnny, creating that character, I think I'd put that up there as one of the biggest learning curves. And watching how when he goes into a close-up, he gets more and more and more and more relaxed. And it's the most extraordinary thing, because normally people, and anyone, kind of, there's suddenly a big camera in your face, and you sort of, you tend to go, and he just totally, and it was an amazing thing to see, and the amount of research that he did as well, because he'd brought not just the book that the film was based on, but tons of books, and was constantly reading them and constantly underlining things. And I think that was the first time in my head that something clicked as far as going, okay, well, wait a minute, what's all of that, and what are you doing? And I mean, obviously I knew the book that it was based on very well, and I knew the script very well, but suddenly this idea that you didn't just have to stick to that you could get influences from everywhere. I think it was him who was the first person that I saw do that.
The next movie I want to talk about is one, again, based on a very iconic book, and where I think you, when you got the part, realised that so many other people loved it, and that was Never Let Me Go. Again, was it one of those things where you read the book and had one response to it, and then realised how significant it was and began to
I
rethink
hadn't
it?
read the book when I got the screenplay. I'd actually just taken a year off. I got to the end of The Duchess and saw this thing that Rafe was doing, and suddenly realised at that point I'd worked solidly for 5 years, and went, I know that there's a lot of stuff that I should have learnt, and I really felt like I'd hit a wall in a funny way with that, and I thought, I know I'm regurgitating and I'm not managing to move forward in this, and I don't understand what he's getting from all of these other books, and I don't understand how he's put this all together, and I suddenly went, right, I really need to step back and try and allow in anything that I might have picked up to actually kind of seep in a bit. So I went off on a bit of a walkabout with a lot of books. And then sort of after about a couple of months, 6 months or something, phoned an agent and went, okay, I think my head's coming back together now, and is there anything? And they sent me quite a few different things. And the first one that I did was a film called Last Night, which was a very small independent film. And then they sent me this script for Never Let Me Go. And at that point, the offer had come in, and they said, "Well, you choose what character. Nobody was attached to it, so what do you want to do in it?" And immediately I went, "Oh, there's this Ruth character." I thought it was the most extraordinary thing I'd read, and I didn't know the book, and I didn't know how it would all fit together, and I was profoundly moved by it and profoundly shocked by it. I think it's that kind of study of death, of mortality, but told through these very, very young people. And that idea of the fact that we don't run, that we tell stories of people who rebel, and of course we do in the small numbers of us do, but actually on the whole we do what we're told, and that might be marching to our death, but we do what we're told. And it's a horrible thing to realise about humans,
human beings,
myself probably, and but I thought that, you know, it's an extraordinary. I thought that was an extraordinary thing, and I think I'm quite interested in taking emotions as a whole thing and then kind of really trying to study them. And I hate to admit it, but I have suffered from jealousy in the past. And I think in looking at all emotions, I think that's the only one that I've found, and it's an obvious thing to say, but that has absolutely no positive to it whatsoever. You know, hate can be quite a positive thing. You can get an amazing motor from hatred. You can create things from hatred, but that insipid kind of jealousy is something that just eats you away.
The soul. Yes.
And with Ruth, I thought, well, that's this creature that has succumbed to this horrendous disease, and I really wanted to look at that and to look at what causes it. So I did a lot of work on that was not in the book, because the book she's not really in the book very much at all. She's a couple of lines. There's nice clues in there, but then went and actually spoke to a psychotherapist about her and about unloved children and all the rest of it. And that was the first time that I'd sort of used a psychoanalyst, not for myself, but it's a friend of the family. And she said, well, if you ever need any help with characters, come and see me. And I went and spoke to her about that and sort of formed this person out of that, which was fascinating.
Did that influence you in any way in deciding to take the role in A Dangerous Method?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. It was also, I was meant to do a film version of a biopic of Zelda Fitzgerald, and the money fell through. So I'd ended up doing a hell of a lot of research into all sorts of kind of conditions that she might have been suffering from. So, and again, talking to a lot of analysts about all the many things that was going on with her. So suddenly that one came through my door, and I have to say, I mean, I had a lot of reservations about it. The sexual nature of it in the internet age was something that I wasn't entirely sure that I wanted to kind of put out there. But it's a Christopher Hampton script, and it was David Cronenberg. And I did actually speak to him and phoned him up to turn the role down. And he said, well, we'll just take the sex out. And then as we were talking about it, you go, no, you can't take the sex out because it's all about the sex. You can't take the sex out. Shit. You can't take the sex out. But yeah, I mean, obviously, again, I spoke to a lot of analysts, 3 analysts about that and about her and about that kind of condition. And within, you know, that's definitely a portrayal of a character that splits opinion, which was kind of the point. And I prepared it 2 ways. One way that was a much softer, much kind of less accurate version of hysteria, but much more palatable. And then this way, and I showed David both of them, and he went, I want that one. And I went, so do I.
Did it change your views about psychoanalysis and about Freud and Jung, in the sense that you were seeing them as real, quotes, real people, certainly as portrayed on screen?
Yeah, you know, I mean, I didn't really have a view on them before, you know, and I have to say my knowledge of Freud and Jung ends in 1913, so I don't think I've got much of a knowledge there. But it was a totally fascinating, and particularly that character. Sorry if you haven't seen it; it's really boring me talking about it when you haven't. But
no, I think many of us will have seen it. Yeah.
Normally people that you play, you have some sort of a link to. You know, you can understand them. You sort of go, yeah, well, I've had that with her, and particularly with the kind of the problems, the sexual side of it. It was absolutely something that I had no idea about, and sort of I found really difficult to read about and to try and understand. And that was sort of what was so extraordinary about it, was actually going, well, you cannot judge this person if you're going to play her. You have to figure her out. And with the descriptions, because obviously, you know, it's a real person, the descriptions of the tics that she was having and the hysterical fits, you know, when you're talking about hysteria, it's a very high energy, high octane thing. It was fascinating to try and piece that in a kind of jigsaw puzzle way and try and go, okay, why the hell would you behave like that? What is the logic behind this madness? Was extraordinary, yeah.
Which brings us naturally to the next strange woman
Yes.
whom you portrayed, Anna Karenina. Again, an iconic figure, part of the world's great literature. Presumably, I'm assuming by this time that you'd done enough of that not to feel daunted. I didn't feel as daunted. It was probably stupidity that meant that I didn't feel daunted. It was Joe phoned me up actually when I was working on Dangerous Method, and he just said, Anna Karenina? And I said, yes.
And he said, we'll only do it if Tom Stoppard does it. And I said, okay. And he said, I'll phone you back. Okay. And he phoned me back in 2 months and said, right, we'll all go. And, you know, when I said yes to it, it was I'd read it when I was about 19, I think. And my memory of her was as the innocent. And she was totally in the right. And everybody else was wrong, and she was excellent, and it was a tragedy. And when I said yes to it, that was my memory. And even when I read, you know, the first draft of Tom's screenplay, it was still with that intention of playing her as the heroine. And it was really quite a profound shock when I went back to the book last summer before we started shooting, and suddenly went, I do not see this person in the way that I remember her. This is not what I remember. And I think how Tolstoy feels of her, the hatred that you can feel at certain points, and then asking the question, okay, well, if you're playing Anna Karenina, what is the function of that character within this story, particularly if, as Joe did, he kept the Kitty and Levin story in. Her function is not to be a simple heroine. Her function is to walk that very morally ambiguous line. And I thought that was quite exciting. So I went for that.
And it worked.
Thank you very much.
And which leads naturally into a question to wrap things up. And that is what you want to do next, what you plan to do next, what your kind of longer term goals are. Is that something that you think about at all, or are you just in the moment?
Don't really think about it. I don't really like to think about it. I got to the end of Anna Karenina and went, good God, I've been dying in pretty much everything I've been doing for the last 5 years, and I really need to stop doing that. So this year was the year of pure entertainment and positive things with happy endings. So I did a film called Can a Song Save Your Life about friendship and making an album with the lovely Mark Ruffalo and Catherine Keener, who were fabulous. And then my next one was a very Hollywood pure piece of entertainment thriller called Jack Ryan with a happy ending. Sorry, I haven't given anything away. I mean, I'm sure you can imagine it's got a happy ending. Because I really felt like I didn't want to die.
Again.
Again and again and again. I don't know what's next. I have no idea. I'm not somebody who's good at planning. I need the interest to be very, very, very alive in order to kind of give everything I've got to it. So I'm not one of those that can sort of go, oh, I want to do that in 3 years' time. So I don't have anything now.
Well, let's put it this way. I think that your method so far has worked extremely well, given us all a huge amount of entertainment. And tonight you've enlightened us all. So thank you very much indeed.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you.